What is an NSFW story you would like to share? Okay, so I met a woman for a date after chatting online. We go for drinks and the chemistry isn't really popping. So I decide to go for a drive and see what happens. After a long time just driving her around the city, she suggests we go to this park to talk. I agree, and after talking for a while, I make a move because why not? Anyway, it escalates and I end up on top of her on the reclined passenger seat, fully engaged. This is the part where things go off the rails. She keeps guiding my hands towards her throat and moaning. I'm no genius, but I know what's up. The problem? I barely know this woman, and this kind of crap requires a ton of trust, which we haven't developed, obviously. Anyway, I just kind of have my hands loosely around her throat, just to make her happy and not seem like a total prude, when poof, a cop's spotlight lights up my car like daytime. So there I am, mounted on a woman, hands around her throat, in a park. As we explained the situation to the cop, I realized I was totally screwed if she lied. I feel like that's true in a lot of situations, though. You can just get super screwed over if the person you're with when you get caught doing something just lies. Because there's no one else to corroborate your story, so, definitely an unlucky one for OP. I'm glad the person told the truth. Story 2. So a couple years back, my girlfriend and I got our first apartment. It was awesome. We decided to celebrate one night with frisky time. The thing about her is that she squirms and shakes a lot when she climaxes. I usually keep a bottle of water around me, usually just because the medication I was on gave me a super dry mouth. Earlier that day I was watching The Exorcist and it was still fresh in my mind. So I go down on her and just start doing what I do. When, before she climaxes, I thought, how funny would it be if I started throwing holy water at her while she climaxes? And that's exactly what I did. Except it wasn't holy water, it was just water. And I was shouting, "The power of Christ compels you," while she climaxed. She was very upset and we did not bang for a while. I still joke about it with her today, though. My man, there's a time and a place. I don't know if this was it, but that is really funny. Story 3. A few months ago, I was playing some icebreaker where you have to bend down and pick something up with your teeth with nothing but your feet touching the ground. Anyway, it was my turn and I had tight khakis on, and when I bent down, my pants split open right in the Panama Canal area. And my sack decided it would take the opportunity to say hi to everyone. Just imagine a fully clothed person teabagging the ground with only their sack hanging out in front of 40 people. Story 4. I was getting my first blowy. I didn't know what to expect, so I just rolled with it. She was grating the head of it on the inside of her molars. It was pretty frickin' awful, and I couldn't imagine how anyone would enjoy it. I let her continue though because I didn't want to upset her. All of a sudden, she stops and spits blood on my leg. At this point, I have no frickin' clue as to what's happening. My dong was bleeding. My mom just said, "Oh, that's not good," and grabbed a towel and ice for me. I can't tell if this is supposed to be a bait joke one about like, oh, surprise, it's his mother, or if it's actually just like, oh, and my mother saw it later and was like, that's not good. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be a jokey bait one. Story 5. I was 16 living with my mother and sister. My father had only recently been kicked out of the house as divorce papers were being created. To keep my mind off it, in the middle of the night, I took my mother's keys and drove across town to pick up my GF at the time. We grabbed some food at McDonald's and re-entered the house via my window. It was a school night. The plan was to just stay up all night doing exactly what you think, and we did just that. A total of 6 times. So naturally, I now have 6 tied and used rubbers that I couldn't fathom disposing of anywhere near my house. So I did what I thought was clever and put all of them, plus the wrappers, into the McDonald's bag. I then dropped said bag out of my window to be disposed of at a later time. Important details about my window. It faced the driveway and the air conditioning unit was almost centered about 2 to 3 feet away from the window, giving enough room to walk behind it. The whole window had landscaping and bushes taller than the standard AC unit, which were used to hide said unit. So there was no possible way a human could ever find the bag or see it from the road at any angle. Now, what should have happened? My mom leaves with my sister to take her to school at 7 a.m. I leave at 7:30 a.m. with girlfriend and meet neighbor who drives us to school where I would throw away my anonymous bag of stress relief. What actually happened? After school, my mom picks me up, which is unusual because I take the bus home every day. She takes me to McDonald's. In the drive-thru, out of the blue, she says, "Son, I don't know how else to ask, so I'll just ask. Are you banging? I come from a very religious background, but my mother is and always will be understanding. I had no issue saying yes, but what I had completely forgotten about was the McDonald's bag. I didn't take it to school that day to dispose of it. Before I could even answer my mother, my phone started to ring, and my mom started to place the order. Lo and behold, it's my girlfriend's mother calling me, yelling into the phone that I had her daughter take Plan B. Now, when it comes to frisky stuff, I'm as safe as can be. Always use protection. The GF and I decided that she should take it after one hot session where my refractory period was so small that I was able to keep going after going once already, without removing the rubber. I had read you should never use a rubber more than once, and though I was confident we'd be okay, I wanted insurance. Oddly enough, the mom was a nurse, but was angry because Plan B could cause an abortion, and what if she was allergic? So I politely tell the mother that her daughter and I had done our research and made a very informed decision. I actually spent about 5 minutes explaining my vast knowledge of the pill because I honestly did care. She had no words to say and respected me from that day forward. Since my mother was sitting in the car next to me, she heard the whole thing. After the call, my answer to her question was obvious. Her reaction was one I'll never forget. She didn't shame me. She praised me for being so knowledgeable and using protection. I love you, Mom. So anyway, she started to bring up why she asked if I was banging. She said something along the lines of, "Now, son, you know I'll always love you. This morning, after I got home from taking your sister to school, there were used rubbers scattered around the driveway." The divorce had been pretty messy, and she went on to say, "So I called your father and asked him if he had done it. He said he didn't and came over to see it for himself. Then he picked them up and threw them away." I had never been so wide-eyed in my life. My mouth opened and nothing came out. I didn't want her to know I had someone over, so I told the truth with some important details left out, with the story essentially being I had no way to get rid of them when we were done, so I took them to dispose of later. She had no reason to not believe me, and we laughed really hard. Then I ate my McDonald's. To this day, we don't know how it happened. My guess is that raccoons in the area smelled the lingering odor from the bag, and upon finding no food, just got really angry and tossed them everywhere. Bonus: I'm 21 now and have since moved out. My mother called last week to inform me that she had to have AC repairs done. When they took the case off, there were 2 more rubbers on the bottom of the AC platform. She thanked me for embarrassing the crap out of her yet again. She said the 2 repairmen tried to act like it wasn't there, but you couldn't not see them. Only then did it strike me that she never mentioned how many were picked up the first time. So yeah, that was a fun ride. Story 6. I got a call about a domestic dispute in a retiree trailer park. When I got there, I knocked and announced my presence. A male voice told me to come in. When I walked into the house, it was the living room area. The guy was on the couch getting head from his elderly wife. Both were bare butt naked. I again announced my presence, and the guy held up one finger, and about 5 seconds later, apparently, finished. The guy got up with his member still out and came over to greet me. I'm not really a cop. I just pretend to be one when I go to my parents' house. This is 2. There have been 6 stories, and there were already 2 that I think are just debate ones about parents and banging. What is happening? Story 7. I will always remember September 2000, as it was the first time I ever saw breasts and some other things. I was a bright-eyed and innocent new freshman 1 month into my high school experience when I went to the beach with my dad. That Saturday began not too dissimilar to any other Saturday. I woke up at our family beach house and had breakfast with my dad, before he had to go to run some errands. As my dad was running errands, he dropped me off at a friend's house, which was on a little canal, so that I could fish while he was away. I set up my gear, threw my net to catch some bait, which I put in a bucket, and sat back to catch some fish. Now, my dad's friend's daughter was at this house with her friends. They were probably about 18, 20, while I was 14, so they were a bit more developed than the girls at my school. As I was fishing, the girls came outside and started hanging out by the water. One of the more open girls saw me sitting alone and decided to give me some company. She hadn't talked to me for 30 seconds before she lifted her top to show me her new piercings. I sat there in awe, not knowing how to react at this beautiful sight. I was used to old Playboy magazines and watching the scrambled Channel 77 hoping for a glimpse of breasts or butt, but this was real. This was in front of me. How could I possibly react to this new situation? Her friends misinterpreted my slack-jawed reaction as that I didn't like what I was seeing and told her to cover herself, after which they went down a little farther down the canal to gossip and giggle. I stayed in my seat, unable to do anything but sit there and fish, lest my swim trunks betray my teen emotions. I sat there for a good 15 minutes until I heard some giggling and noticed the girls circled around my bait bucket. I had become less visibly excited in this time, so I went over to investigate. The sight that awaited my young eyes haunts my dream to this day. I arrived to find one of the heavier girls on the ground, spread eagle with her friend snapping photos with a disposable camera. When I looked closer, I saw the tail of one of my bait fish flopping around inside of her. That's right, this woman was using a fish as a living vibrator. It was one of the most disturbing and disgusting things I've ever seen. Remember, this was in the days before Two Girls, One Cup or that kind of thing, so my mind had no way to process this vile sight. So that's the story of how I saw my first breasts and when I learned where mermaids come from. Story 8. During my university years, I traveled up to Leeds, North England, to visit some friends of friends for an inevitably messy party. Said party was indeed glorious after buying copious amounts of cheap gin and orange juice like the well-hung grandmas we are. Anyway, so we all go out after pre-drinks and completely out of character, I immediately hit on a girl as we enter a bar and I score. Baffled, I keep it up and I end up going back to hers. Before I leave, I exchange confused looks with my equally baffled mates who couldn't believe what I'd done. It was still only midnight. Anyway, so we're talking and making out lots and get back to her student flat, diving out of the taxi and scampering up into her place as fast as possible. Squeezing into her tiny bedroom with a nice little ensuite, we quickly begin jostling on the bed like electrocuted walruses. When she pauses, "I don't want to be a one-night kind of girl. I'm not like that. Sorry." Or words to that effect were uttered and immediately caved my hopes and dreams. A sudden wave of despair drowned me where I was knelt like some kind of frisky little goblin at the end of her bed. My dong went limp, I hung my head. Yeah, no problem, let's just get some sleep. Though briefly awkward and ruthlessly devastating, we did cuddle up nicely and fall asleep. Only, that's when the fun begins. I'm half asleep, climbing out of a dream hours later, when I feel a sensation. It feels odd and my head gets dizzy. I ignore it for a moment and then it hits me like a ton of bricks. I'd had a wet dream and I'm 21. She's right beside me, fast asleep. It's a single bed with barely any room, so the chances of her rolling into my sticky patch of shame was high. Embarrassed, I get up and quickly wash, removing my underwear and rolling them up. I stuff them into my jeans and I climb back into bed, laying in the cream puddle to my absolute dismay. It clung to me. The next day, it had completely dried and left a large, much darker patch of doom. I waited for her to get up first, and immediately tidied her bed and hid the bed spunk graffiti with haste. We both cleaned, got dressed without underwear, and made our way into town. We had coffee, laughed about the night, and made our awkward goodbyes. And as I got into the taxi back to my friends, I couldn't help but think about the present I'd left for her. OP didn't even try to clean it up, dude. Come on. I mean, I guess he already did, but you know what I mean. I find it a little weird that OP stayed the night still, though, instead of just being like, oh, okay, no worries, I'ma head out. Maybe he didn't want to go back to his friends with the shame of like, yeah, she didn't wanna. Story 9. Back when I still dormed at my university, I would usually spend the week at campus taking my classes and then go home every other weekend, which was a 2-hour train ride away. Anywho, on the weekends that I did stay over, I more often than not got plastered with my friends during the nights we spent together. One Friday in particular had me going to a cramped single room with about 5 other friends, and downing roughly 2 750ml Smirnoffs and a Fireball whiskey. I ended up drinking way too much with the idea that I'd have all of Saturday to recuperate in my own room. Unfortunately, the morning after, I got a phone call from my mother around 8 a.m., with her asking me to take the first train home so that we could go to visit our temple. She insisted that she had mentioned it the day before, but I had no recollection of that conversation. After failing to plead that I was feeling tired, sick, and fatigued, she forced me to take the first train off campus. I was severely hungover at this point in the morning, so I simply grabbed my backpack and dashed toward the train station, as I feared I was going to miss my ride. I was queasy on the jog over and had the opportunity to grab a plastic bag to cover any spillage, but I regrettably decided against doing so and made the train with a few minutes to spare. On board, I immediately felt sick with the moving of the train, so I basically ended up throwing up all over my shoes and the floor in front of me, several times, until it became hard to breathe. A kind lady sitting across the aisle from me gave me gum to save my breath. To the LIRR employee who had to clean that crap up, I feel awful for putting you through that. Story 10. One night, Nex and I decided to kink it up a notch. She loved having her butt played with, slapped, squeezed, poked, etc. Oh, I miss her. Anyway, for some reason we decided on using my belt. While she was riding me, it started out with a few gentle whacks. It was going well, so I amped up the force a bit and accidentally overshot my mark. Smack! right in the balls. We did finish after laughing hysterically for a good 10 minutes. Story 11. I'll tell the story of my first experience. It was, terrible. I was 14 or 15 and getting a handy for the first time. Except this girl obviously had never seen anything in her life. She had absolutely no clue what she was doing. We were in her living room and her parents wouldn't be home for another hour. She grabs it and starts moving it up and down like a lever. At the time, I'm like, yeah, okay, this feels kinda good. Someone is touching my dong. After a few minutes, she looks at me and stops. You don't like it. I tell her I do, but try to mix it up. She starts turning it like a crank in circles. We keep kissing and this continues for a few more minutes and she stops again. Out of frustration, she stops. Why haven't you finished yet? You have to stroke it. So she grabs the head hard and starts lightly pulling, but she pushes painfully hard. Imagine someone punching you in the pubes with their hand wrapped around your dong. Someone is touching my dong though, so I bear through the pain and tell myself, it's not so bad. After a seriously rough pull, I cringe and she gives up again. Show me how you do it. I do, and she starts doing it. Yeah, now we're getting somewhere. Feels awesome. I'm nearing the end and I let her know. She suggests the bathroom. I stand over the toilet while she stands next to me and goes to town. I tell her it's about to happen and she panics and runs out of the bathroom, leaving the door open. To prevent ruining everything, I finish myself off. Just as I begin to climax, I hear the back door slam. Her parents are home, and here I am with an open bathroom door mid-nut. I quickly pinched myself off and closed the door. In the panic, I realize I have made a mess on the floor. So after cleaning up, I returned to the living room and nobody was the wiser. Later that day, I realized the damage done to my dong. There were scabs, rips, and areas that had been rubbed raw. There was blood under my pubes where hair had been pulled out too. It was by far the worst handy I had ever received. I pretty much banged a cheese grater and still managed to finish. Hey OP, I noticed you used the word, received there. Have you given worse? Story 12. So I'm 16, met the most amazing girl at space camp. First girl who was so damn awesome that I wanted to be closer to her so badly that I was able to overcome the crazy shyness and low self-esteem and ask her out. Fast forward some months and we're not banging, not even going down on each other, but there's a lot of heavy petting and nakedness. I've steered clear of adult content my whole life, and they don't really show male naked bodies in most movies like they do women. So she and I both don't really know the normal variation of what a dong looks like. Let me tell you, I was outside of that normal variation. I'm starting to become aware that she can't really handle me intuitively without causing some pain. So I do a lot of research to try and figure out what's wrong, and lo and behold, my dong is wrong. I got checked out by a GP, which sure was fun. You haven't had an awkward trip to a doctor until they have you on a table prodding and fiddling with your dong with rubber gloves on. Recommendation: circumcision. So I went and did that, and that was fun. Girlfriend broke up with me around this time, but that wasn't the primary source of pain. It turns out if the head of your dong goes almost 17 years without having so much as a breeze touch it, and you suddenly have it fully exposed all the time, your brain cannot handle it. It's like it adjusted to the circumstances so you could feel stuff normally. And then once the skin is removed, it's like an open wound. The most profound pain I've ever experienced in my entire life was removing and replacing the bandage for the first few times. Second best pain I've ever experienced in my life is my underwear brushing up against it. It was screwed up. This went on for months. Recovery was a lot longer than the fortnight or so the surgeon told me. The wound healed in that long, but the sensitivity lingered for about a year. Fast forward to a few months later. I'm back at my final year in high school. I no longer wear a bandage for the wound. I wear them to protect myself from the pain. I'm in maths class and it slips, which in itself is very painful. But now there is movement down there, which is a continuous cause of pain whenever I move. Now, I've been limping oddly for months now trying to avoid the pain. Virtually all the guys in my classes have caught on that the surgery I went and got a while back was dong surgery, as there's some kind of empathy only guys can have. I'd spent months walking around like I'd just been hit in the balls by a baseball. None of the girls have figured that out though, it's like insider knowledge. So I'm wincing in class when a girl who's quite a looker asks me what's wrong. I say, oh, I'm just rather sore. She generously offers to give me a massage in the affected area. Every guy in the class goes hysterical with laughter. So yeah, I got cut when I was 17. It hurt for ages afterwards, and a girl accidentally offered to give my dong a massage. The lesson is for parents worldwide to take sex ed with their kids very seriously. My problem was 100% avoidable if I just had some guidance in early childhood.